In both the original and new government sentencing memorandums, they call this man a liar. They talk about how he pretended to be a police officer to try to arrest a woman. They talk about him telling lies about his military service. They have him lying about January 6th. They have him lying that he wouldn't go on the run, and him faking a medical emergency after he triggered a national manhunt and lied to stay in the hospital. And not only do they call him out on these lies, they provide evidence. Because many times he outright admits it to them, or for some reason he sends it in a text message and keeps forgetting. The government will get that too. Christopher Worrell might be a name you're familiar with. He is a J6 defendant who fled before his sentencing and then was found unresponsive in his home. Or was he? There's going to be quite a bit to go through, and the government actually has a new sentencing memorandum for him that explains some of it, but we're going to start with the original. This is the original government sentencing memorandum. They want to sentence Christopher Worrell to 198 months of imprisonment, 3 years of supervised release, $2,000 in restitution, a fine of up to $181,000, and $610 in mandatory special assessments. Why is the fine so high? They are going for the give, send, go money, and they explain very clearly why. Now, what made the government seek 14 years for this man? Christopher Worrell was found guilty after a bench trial in which he perjured himself of assaulting a group of police officers with a deadly and dangerous weapon in order to thwart Congress's certification of the 2020 Electoral College vote and the peaceful transfer of power. Worrell plotted his trip to D.C. with other Proud Boys from his zone for weeks leading up to January 6th, participating in conversations in which the police were called traitors and Proud Boys brainstormed ways to disrupt the certification. Consistent with this planning, Worrell arrived in D.C. ready for battle, wearing body armor and carrying pepper spray gel and a large radio to coordinate with his zone mates. So this was a pre-planned event for him. You might argue that many people on January 6th planned ahead what they were going to do, but Worrell was a little different. Worrell, unlike most January 6th rioters, multiplied the threat of his conduct by advancing on the Capitol with a large group of like-minded individuals clad in tactical gear and weaponry and intent on disrupting the certification. Unlike many January 6th rioters, Worrell coordinated with these Proud Boys before January 6th during their collective march to the Capitol and while on Capitol grounds. Unlike most January 6th rioters, Worrell assaulted officers with a deadly and dangerous weapon. Unlike many January 6th rioters, Worrell lied to the FBI repeatedly, made vague threats towards witnesses, and refused to turn himself in. Unlike many January 6th rioters, Worrell has profited from his participation in the riot to a tune of over $181,000, peddling the lie that he is a falsely charged political prisoner. Due to his efforts, that false narrative made its way into his local county commissioners meeting to 2 major cable networks. And unlike many January 6th rioters, Worrell refused to take responsibility, has shown no remorse, and lied numerous times under oath to the court. Worrell should be punished accordingly. The government seeks a low-end sentence only because of Worrell's ongoing medical conditions. I want you to understand this. That time frame that they offered him, the 14 years, is low end because of his medical conditions. And we're going to get into those conditions. The government, as you can see behind me, goes into detail about what they did on January 6th, their planning and their talks. As you can see here, another Proud Boy member from his group said kicking the doors in. Yes, there's quite a bit of information of exactly what he did. Worrell calling USCP commies with guns. There's quite a bit detailing exactly what was said and what was done. I'm not going to go through all of it. Just understand that you've heard similar in the other Proud Boy trials if you followed them. If you want to see this document, it'll be in the pinned comment, along with the updated sentencing memorandum, by the way. I do want to mention briefly here where Worrell repeatedly screamed, "Fuck you," at the USCP, and then used a racial slur to describe them while holding up his middle finger. Shocked, I'm sure. So here we are at the FBI interview on January 18th at his home. In that interview, Worrell made 3 knowingly false statements. He claimed he did not witness any crimes or violence towards law enforcement on January 6th, which he admitted at trial was false. He claimed that patriots didn't storm the Capitol, it was BLM, Antifa, and paid actors, but admitted at trial that when he made the statement, he already knew 2 of his fellow Proud Boy members had entered the Capitol, as had others who were not BLM, Antifa, and paid actors. Worrell also told FBI he did not enter Capitol grounds, but admitted at trial he knew he had been on Capitol grounds on January 6th. Shortly after that interview, believing someone had reported him to the FBI, Worrell logged onto Facebook to announce he had a plan to deal with the rat. Worrell said, "So whomever called the feds on me, rest assured I know who you are, and we will be discussing this soon. You are the piece of shit I knew you were." He then replied to various comments on this post with additional implied threats of potential violence. He dug the hole quite deep from the start. You can read some of those threats here if you would like. Worrell was arrested on March 12, 2021 at trial. FBI Task Force Officer Grady testified that the FBI twice directed Worrell to turn himself in immediately when he was not located at home. Worrell twice refused, instead insisting on driving all the way back home. That brought him an additional 2.5 hours along with the phone. On Worrell's phone were the following messages. 7:08 a.m., minutes after Worrell was first called by the FBI, another Proud Boy texted him, "Turn your location off on your phone." Worrell replied, "Done, gonna zap it." At roughly the same time, another individual texted Worrell, "Make sure to clear the phone." His phone messages, by the way, are going to be a common theme later, it seems. Now, after his arrest, he did do more proffer interviews with the FBI, and according to this, lied in them. He said that he left the boots on the ground chat before Christmas, when in fact he participated in the chat until at least January 7th, when he told the entire chat to delete it. Nuke this shit. He said that there was no plan to meet up at the Washington Monument and that the Proud Boys went there only because there was a good view, when in fact Worrell received several chats stating that the group needed to meet at the Washington Monument at 10 a.m. Lo and behold, he arrived at the time designated. That his group did not have the National Proud Boy radio frequencies, when in fact he sent the group the frequencies. That when Danielle Scott bulldozed officers on the step, Scott had gone up to the steps and then disappeared, when in fact Worrell celebrated Scott's assault with Scott immediately after it occurred. He did another interview where he told an elaborate fake story about protecting police. Worrell also called from jail into Newsmax, and they're using that against him. He stated that the charge that he assaulted a line of police officers with pepper spray gel was completely false and fabricated, and a crime that they had no evidence of. I am going to skip over much of the trial because it's things you've probably heard before, but if you want to see it, it will be in the full document, of course. But I do want to mention his history of misrepresentation segment. Worrell has a history of making prolific and opportunistic false statements, especially when confronted with his own misconduct. For example, Worrell enlisted with the Air Force in July 1990 and was discharged with an entry-level separation by mid-December 1990. When asked by the probation office about his military service, Worrell claimed that there was no specific incident that led to his discharge. That is untrue. The Air Force shows that he was discharged because he failed to show up for work on 4 separate days and left base against orders on 2 others. The same records indicate that Worrell, when caught, misrepresented to his superiors that he had permission to not attend work. Worrell has consistently misrepresented his service to others, even in just the conversations in which the government has been privy. While being interviewed by a Turkish news program about the Proud Boys in late 2020, Worrell asserted he had fought in a Muslim war. In a jail email in 2021, he inserted that during Desert Shield Storm, he had been to Saudi and had scuds dropped around us. Sentencing Exhibit A at 1-2 on another jail call, Worrell claimed that he was an equivalent of the Air Force security forces, the military police. Sentencing Exhibit B, none of those claims were substantiated by the Air Force records. Oh, exhibits? We have exhibits. So this, according to the document, is a lie. Hey Chris, how are you doing? I hope okay. It is terrible you're unable to get the cancer medicine you need. The fact you're being a combat vet makes it a disgusting act. You got your own cell, or what is up? I'm good, brother. I'll try to catch you later as we go down here. I'm doing okay. Court Tuesday at 2. While I am a vet during Desert Shield Storm and been to Saudi, I am not a combat vet, even though we had scuds dropping around us. LOL. I appreciate you staying in touch. Happy Easter. Ura, brother. Proud of your boy. Is there anything you need? A ride home? LOL. I'm good right now, brother. You got me hooked up for now. Appreciate it, brother. But we have more misrepresentations. In 2009, when caught by a police after attempting to impersonate a law enforcement officer and to arrest a woman, Worrell lied and denied displaying a badge to her. Officers searched his car and found a badge matching the description provided by the victim. After January 6, 2021, Worrell lied on Facebook multiple times about what occurred that day, claiming the crowd was entirely peaceful. January 2021, when first interviewed by the FBI, Worrell lied 3 times about January 6, about whether he was on the Capitol grounds at all, but whether he witnessed violence, and about whom he saw enter the Capitol building. In a filing with this court, Worrell claims on August 11, 2021, that he had not received appointments for 2 biopsies. But in a subsequent proffer with the government, Worrell admitted that he had refused to go to those biopsy appointments after they had been made in July. You see, his cancer treatment has been part of the sob story that has helped him raise money, and this really shines a light on what's going on. As noted above, Worrell lied repeatedly in his proffers with the government on July and August 2021. And December 2021, just after 1 month of supervising Worrell on pretrial release, his local experienced pretrial services officer suggests that Worrell was misrepresenting to the court that his bond conditions precluded him from attending medical appointments. Mr. Worrell has provided very little to virtually no verification as to his medical issues, diagnosis, or treatment plans. He has only provided me doctor's and dentist appointment confirmations. He has not requested any adjustments to the schedule after his submission. The officer added, "In my opinion, Mr. Worrell is confrontational, manipulative, and passive-aggressive with the conditions of his release and his overall supervision. He questions every aspect of supervision and is attempting to manipulate the home detention portion of the bond to suit his desires." In April 2022, Worrell told pretrial services he was going to the local county government center for his son. Instead, he went to make false statements about his arrest and case at a public Collier County Commissioners meeting. In July 2022, Worrell went to a rally for another detained January 6 defendant in a jail parking lot. He had contact with another Proud Boy there. Both his attendance and contact were violations of his conditions of release. Worrell claimed that he went to the rally because it was the only time and place he could meet his civil attorney. The court heard that excuse and concluded it was the most ridiculous explanation I'd ever heard in my life. Worrell also asserted he was not a member of the Proud Boys and did not wear Proud Boy clothing, another false claim that is easily refuted, included by Worrell's testimony at trial. Exhibit C about that little rally. And we go down here and let's see exactly what was said. So Mr. Worrell saying that he had a meeting with his lawyer at a rally is the most ridiculous explanation I've ever heard in my life. I understand that's what he's saying, but I think the public record should be there on that. At his trial, assuming he takes a stand, he's going to pay dearly for testimony about stupid mistakes he's made like that. In my view, how is he going to explain to a jury that he makes a deal to go meet his lawyer at a rally when he's under an obligation to not do that? But that's just another stupid mistake he's made. In any event, I appreciate very much you're getting the detail explained from the doctor. And yes, they have things here about his medical records. Again, there'll be more about his medical claims. In September 2022, Worrell claimed in a filing that he was unable to speak following jaw surgery, and the court relaxed his conditions because of that statement. But it was apparently false. The government later obtained medical records showing that approximately the same time, he was screaming at a nurse in the hospital. Worrell told the probation office he had not smoked marijuana after his first drug test in 2022, but USPO records show that he had been tested positive for marijuana at least once in 2023, and there were multiple positive tests for it in 2023. At trial, Worrell made false statements while under oath. In sum, Worrell has lied to the military, to the local police, to the FBI, to his pretrial services officers, to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and to this court. He has impersonated a police officer and lied about his military service, about his medical conditions, about his drug use. This track record should color how this court receives any statements by Worrell at all or before sentencing. Now we get into Worrell's medical history. The government has never and does not now dispute that Worrell has certain serious medical conditions, including cancer. That is why the government is requesting a low-end sentence. Those conditions in Worrell's medical status also warrant placement in a Bureau of Prisons facility that is designed to care for inmates with such conditions. The government has disputed many of Worrell's specific claims of mistreatment or medical emergency. but only when the medical records undercut, refuted, or failed to support Worrell's claims. So, he's been lying. Medical records, affidavits, or information from healthcare providers that undercut Worrell's claims have come from the D.C. jail's healthcare contractor. Worrell claiming in August 2021 that he's been being denied 2 biopsies. Medical records showing he claimed he has declined to attend both biopsies in July 2021, which was later corroborated by Worrell during proffer. So yes, he claimed he was denied 2 biopsies, but he refused them. Order noting court skepticism of Worrell's claim that his COVID-19 symptoms were severe in light of medical records, including twice daily temperature checks. In the Charlotte County Jail, government physician and Chief Judge Howell explained that the Charlotte County Jail was not denying Worrell access to prescription medication, as he claimed. From various departments at Howard University Hospital, emergency room records undercutting Worrell's COVID-19 claims about his symptoms. From local hospitals to which Worrell was taken in the fall of 2022, Worrell yelling at a nurse at a time when he claimed he could not speak, and from his own providers. Oncology records undercut claim that his cancer was progressing. So he lied about the progression of his cancer. The examples cited above are but a few representations made by Worrell in his various filings that the government has been unable to substantiate with subsequent medical records. Presumably, these different physicians at different facilities have not all misrepresented Worrell's health in their records. The government submits its more likely explanation is that Worrell has at times mischaracterized his medical treatment or condition in his filing. I think this note here is worth adding. Worrell has repeatedly faulted the Bureau of Prisons for denying him cancer treatment in custody, but that is not true. Prior to his arrest, Worrell apparently did not undergo the chemotherapy or radiation recommended by his oncologist in August 2020. Once in custody, by contrast, Worrell requested immediate and conventional treatment for his cancer. But when his Howard University Hospital oncologist, ear, nose, and throat specialist concurred in the need for diagnostic biopsies, Worrell twice refused to attend them by his own admission, delaying his treatment by weeks or months. Only after this second oncologist then recommended chemotherapy did Worrell undergo that treatment after his release that he had not pursued prior to his arrest. Sounds like he was using the cancer treatment, to me at least, as a way to try to get pity and some special treatment once arrested. Worrell has gone out of his way to disseminate misinformation about January 6th. Indeed, in several jail calls, Worrell painted himself and others as the victim of a government setup, supposedly involving several congressmen to entrap conservatives into breaching the Capitol so they could be rounded up. Worrell describing another conspiracy theory about the CARES Act, including appropriations to prepare to jail conservatives for January 6th. In another, he dictated the following statement as edited by Worrell during the call. January 6th was about the Constitution. The people's state of mind that day was about protecting and preserving our democracy. The Constitution, the violence that day was perpetrated against the people while exercising their constitutional First Amendment rights. The people's reaction was a result of the violence against them in an attempt to save innocent lives. That says to see Exhibit G. More than that, Worrell has aggressively promoted the idea that January 6th prosecutions are invalid and that he is a factually innocent political prisoner. That January 6th was a setup, that his arrest was unconscionable, and the Capitol Police were not the victims, but the instigators on that day. On top of his Facebook post, he called into Newsmax in August 2021, called his charges totally false and fabricated, and asked whether he regretted any of his conduct on January 6th. He said, "Nobody I knew talking about it during or after had any idea that anything was going to occur that day. None of us had any tendencies for anything other than to preach our First Amendment rights and protest of our tyrannical government. It seems like they are worried about their own political agenda." He later violated his conditions to attend a county commissioner's meeting to falsely claim his third-party custodian, Tricia Priller, was held at gunpoint for hours on the date of his arrest. Ms. Priller, for her part, spoke to the Naples Daily News on January 2022, appearing to call this court's bond restrictions truly disgusting and a gross denial of civil rights and due process, to the Epoch Times in June 2022, making false statements of the government's search of his home, perhaps at Worrell's behest. And yes, they do have that exhibit as well. Also, Tucker Carlson, claiming, among other things, that in custody, January 6th defendant's food was being poisoned. Worrell has raised nearly $200,000 off of online fundraising appeals, in which he claims he is an innocent political prisoner. He then lied repeatedly under oath in an attempt to escape punishment. In light of Worrell's criminal conduct and post-January 6th representation to the public, and to this court, a significant sentence is required to promote respect for the law. Here's the conclusion where you can see what they're wanting. Again, I mentioned this at the start, and you can see they have an archive of Give, Send, Go. They have another Give, Send, Go link, and they say that John Pierce has taken on all these cases pro bono, so we had no out-of-pocket expenses. So the Give, Send, Go with that large amount of money, here they are saying it had no out-of-pocket expenses. With that being said, there is a second sentencing memorandum, which goes into some very, very interesting details. What I read to you previously was the original government sentencing memorandum, but you see here, we have a new one, and there had to be an update because things happened. The defendant, Christopher Worrell, fled supervision prior to sentencing, triggering a manhunt. He apparently had no intention of ever turning himself in. Worrell was recaptured, however, when he attempted to covertly return to his address. Worrell then faked a drug overdose prior to his arrest and maintained that lie during a 5-day hospital stay, wasting the time and money of both medical staff and the Collier County Sheriff's Office, which provided deputies to watch Worrell 24/7 in a non-secure hospital location and was left to foot the bill for Worrell's unnecessary medical care. The government submits this supplemental memorandum to put these new aggravating facts before the court for its consideration at sentencing. The court should increase the sentence it was previously going to impose on Worrell to account for this new misconduct. On August 14, 2023, 4 days prior to his sentencing before this court, Worrell cut off his GPS ankle monitor in a Walmart parking lot and fled his residence. He did not notify his third-party custodian. His third-party custodian found Worrell gone and a note making clear he had fled around 4:50 p.m. The government then notified of Worrell absconding until around 9 to 10 p.m., so they didn't tell them until 9 or 10 p.m. The Middle District of Florida's pretrial services office had not been notified until undersigned counsel was able to reach the office around 11 p.m., so there was a lot of delay. Worrell's flight triggered an FBI manhunt that culminated 6 weeks later in his arrest on September 28, 2023. And you might remember this arrest because it did make national news. Worrell attempted to covertly return to his home for the first time. The FBI staked out and ultimately entered his residence. Inside, they found Worrell seemingly unresponsive with an opened bottle of opioid prescription medication in his hand. They performed what they thought were life-saving procedures, transported Worrell to the hospital. This was the government learned. Worrell's flight triggered an FBI manhunt that culminated 6 weeks later in his arrest. On September 28, 2023, Worrell attempted to covertly return to his house for the first time. The FBI staked out and ultimately entered his residence. Inside, they found Worrell seemingly unresponsive with an opened bottle of opioid prescription medication in his hand. They performed what they thought were life-saving procedures and transported Worrell to the hospital. This was, the government learned later, all a ruse. Worrell pretended to have a medical emergency as a delay tactic to stall the government's investigation. Exhibit A. Worrell admitting to as much to a friend who heard about his purported overdose. So yeah, we have that exhibit. So a friend thought he had an overdose, right? Contacted him. No, she didn't say anything. I'm here, bro. I may not be able to speak to you a lot, but I'm here. We can message. I know it's not the same, but it's something I'm not going to leave you high and dry. I need to know the truth, bro. Did you try to kill yourself? I hope you didn't. I need the truth. I did not. I'll explain more when we talk. I already told you some of it. Okay, I believe you. I have never and will never lie to you. It was a stupid delay tactic. We'll tell you more when we talk. How did he not know that the government was going to get this when the government has all of his messages used in the previous sentencing memorandum? And this was not some temporary lapse in judgment. Worrell was transported to the hospital where he stayed for 5 days before he was medically cleared with the doctors who believed he had an overdose on opioids. During that time, he was watched 24/7 by 2 Collier County Sheriff's Office deputies who were unable to respond to other actual emergencies in the county. The Sheriff's Office paid $5,340 for their overtime labor and was billed for all of Worrell's medical expenses. The entire time, Worrell knew he was fine. During his arrest at his residence, the FBI also found night vision goggles, a wallet with approximately $4,000 in cash, a bag with new camping gear inside. Worrell's third-party custodian confirmed none of that was hers. It is clear Worrell intended to never return to face consequences before this court, despite personally repeatedly promising this court, when seeking pretrial release, that he was not trying to not answer for his charges. Worrell's flight is relevant for 5 reasons. First, it demonstrates contempt for this judicial proceeding and an attempt by Worrell to evade all consequences for his misconduct on January 6, 2021, and his perjury during trial. This court has exhibited graciousness towards and patience with Worrell. Because of Worrell's medical conditions, this court released Worrell in November 2021, opted in August 2022 to not take him back into custody, despite his bond condition violations. And in May 2023 concluded that his medical condition was an exceptional reason to not remand Worrell pending sentencing, which would otherwise have been effective mandatory because Worrell was convicted of a crime of violence. Yet, Worrell repaid the court's trust in him by becoming one of the few January 6 defendants to have fled before trial or sentencing. That is galling. Second, Worrell's flight makes clear that being convicted and sitting through this court's refutation of his ridiculous trial testimony has not changed him. He remains as unremorseful as he was when he perjured himself during the trial. The court should thus ignore any belated attempts by him now to apologize. Worrell had many opportunities to admit his conduct or express remorse even after conviction. He instead fled and had to be dragged while faking a medical emergency back into custody. Third, Worrell triggered a manhunt and enormous waste of government resources. The FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office spent 6 weeks tracking Worrell, obtained multiple warrants, many subpoenas, and other legal processes, all while sending leads throughout the country from New York to South Carolina to Texas to California to Oregon to track down tips about his location. Even after his arrest, Worrell's faked overdose ploy diverted law enforcement and hospital resources and cost the local sheriff's office, at minimum, thousands of dollars. It would be appropriate for the court to lengthen Worrell's sentence and to increase his fine as just punishment and deterrence for this lost and wasted flight and faked overdose cause. Fourth, Worrell's flight and faked overdose suggests that he has deployed medical emergencies, whether real or not the government does not always know, for strategic reasons in this case. When his trial was approaching, Worrell sought multiple medical continuances. Fourth, Worrell's flight and faked overdose suggests that he deployed medical emergencies, whether real or not the government does not always know, for strategic reasons in this case. When his trial date was approaching, Worrell sought multiple continuances based on months-long series of medical episodes that Worrell asserted made it unsafe for him to do sedentary things like fly or drive to D.C. or even sit through a trial. Yet, once he had been convicted, Worrell felt healthy enough to flee in Florida's summer heat, cut off contact with his trading provisions, and live as a fugitive while carrying night vision goggles and camping gear. And when caught, he faked the medical emergency by pretending to have overdosed on painkillers in an apparent attempt to strategically buy time or avoid questioning by law enforcement. To be clear, nobody disputes that Worrell has had several bouts with cancer, though it is worth noting that last fall, he told medical staff he was currently cancer-free following chemotherapy, and his oncologist later found no clear sign of active skin disease. Similarly, no one disputes that Worrell has had over the last 3 years fainted multiple times, broken his finger, and required jaw surgery from years of radiation treatment. The court should recommend Worrell's placement in a Bureau of Prisons facility appropriate to treat these conditions. But now Worrell has admitted to faking a drug overdose for strategic reasons. And as the government has documented at length elsewhere, some of Worrell's claims to his medical treatment or conditions have been unsubstantiated by or directly refuted by medical records from at least half dozen different medical providers. As always, the government can only review these medical records and cannot independently evaluate his medical conditions. On top of that, Worrell has now repeatedly lied under oath to this court at trial, after providing the most ridiculous explanation this court has ever heard to attempt to excuse his 2020 bond violation. Again, that's about him saying he went to a rally and met up with a Proud Boy because he needed to go there to talk to his attorney. At this point, Worrell's claims of past medical mistreatment while in custody should be viewed as suspect. Fifth, Worrell's flight requires a sentence that deters others from choosing to flee. Many other defendants, January 6 and otherwise, are in Worrell's position, released pending trial or sentencing, and face hefty charges or sentences. A few, like Worrell, also have absconded, fled, or failed to appear, including as recently a few weeks ago. United States v. Brew, United States v. Burlew, United States v. Olivia Pollack. While its disappearance attracted national media attention, I mentioned that previously, the court should lengthen Worrell's sentence to ensure that other defendants do not think about fleeing prior to sentencing will lead to no consequences once they are caught. The conclusion they give is, for the reasons set forth, the government recommends this court increase Worrell's sentence to account for his absconding prior to sentencing and his faked overdose upon arrest. So Worrell, if we go through all the sentencing documents, he lies a lot. Sometimes, trying to arrest a woman while pretending to be a police officer, according to the previous sentencing document. Sometimes about his medical conditions. Sometimes that he won't go on the run. Now, I want to note here that the government does not say what increase they want to give him. They do not say what the increase they want to give him is for the fine or the length in jail.